It's time for another podcast by George. Straight talk, straight from the heartland, that'll have you saying, "By George, I think he's got it." Now, here's George.
Hello, hi, how are you? And welcome to another podcast by George, a special moment. It's what we've been promoting here. We're going to do what I've been calling a post-mortem on the most recent Iowa Caucus, and that term couldn't be more apropos. A couple of reasons. We're talking to the doc, Dr. Stephen W. Schmidt, the Lucan Endowed Professor of Political Science at Iowa State University. So that post-mortem's known to doctors in the medical profession. But Doc, I don't know. A lot of people would say that's an apropos term for the Iowa caucuses. Stick a fork in it. We just killed it. What do you think?
We're in a morgue. And I have my scalpel right here. And I am doing the postmortem on the Iowa caucuses, and not only the caucuses, but the Iowa Democratic Party. It was the most painful night in 50 years. I've been doing this for 50 years. I've been a professor at Iowa State for 50 years, and of course, the modern caucuses started 50 years ago. Never have I seen such a disaster, such a badly thought through process that years ago, when they first changed the Iowa caucus rules and how it was going to be done, I said, it's too complicated. Make it simple. Simple is always more elegant. And then they added, an app which hadn't been tested and which was created by an outfit run by Hillary Clinton's former supporters. And I was thinking, if you just asked me, I would have said, it's probably not a great idea. Hillary Clinton and Bernie Sanders have had an issue about skewing things and leaning the party in the direction of Hillary Clinton and costing Bernie. I talked to Bernie bros at during the evening. I did the entire evening in Des Moines from 4 o'clock when I did Telemundo. Then we started Channel 5. All the way to midnight when the satellite system went down and they said, well, there's nothing coming through anyway, so go back to the Holiday Inn. And then I did at 6 a.m. at the Holiday with 2 hours of sleep. I do really great with less sleep because my mind doesn't work and my mouth opens up and I just talk. So I did Telemundo, Univision, CNN, and Español. And it was shocking because everybody said, why would they pick Hillary Clinton staff people and Democratic consultants associated with the establishment of the party to create an app which has an algorithm that reports the results of the caucuses and makes mathematical calculations that will determine who is the candidate coming out of Iowa as the winner. The whole thing was really like a third world country.
It was embarrassing, and you know where I'm at on all of this, and we've talked about it before from my progressive viewpoint. I've talked about Russiagate, and we've joked about Russia and their supposed influence on our elections and everything like that. But this can be tied directly to that because the Democratic Party went and got this app and did this because they're mortified, they're terrified of the Russians intercepting and influencing the American electoral process. So they got the app to block the Russians and effectively block themselves. God, you can't make this up, Doc.
Well, the irony of it is, and you're right, that I heard more people than ever before say, paper and a pen or pencil, and you put down, your favorite candidate and maybe number 2, you put it in a box, and then they count it and call it in on a telephone. It works pretty well. It worked pretty well. And when you go in this direction, you're taking so many risks, George. I mean, and of course the telephone system was still there in case the app didn't work for a few people, and it didn't work. And so lots and lots and lots of precinct captains and secretaries tried using the phone system. And we talked to a couple of them. They called in, busy tone, beep, beep, beep. So they waited. They waited for an hour And apparently at the headquarters, they didn't want to answer the phone. They didn't want to answer it because they were freaked out. There was nothing they could do. They didn't have the staff. And so they would pick the phone up and hang it up, and then the phone was hung up. So then people started taking pictures of the results and posting them on their Facebook page, hoping the party would go to their Facebook page to get them. Can you imagine an election run like that in Guatemala? Jesus, Jimmy Carter would be down there, condemning the process and saying the regime is trying to skew things.
Exactly.
There was one person that I know of for sure, and I think there were more who were close by the Democratic headquarters, who got all their stuff and drove down to the headquarters to hand deliver the results, and they wouldn't let them in.
Is that right?
They wouldn't let them in.
I did not hear. Oh my God!
And the doors locked. It was a nightmare, and the Iowa Democrats today, they really need a go to Jesus moment. I mean, the Democratic leaders of Iowa, I don't know who they are. A lot of them are nobodies, but there are somebodies. Tom Miller, our Attorney General for life. Tom Miller needs to go down to that headquarters and grab those rats by their scruff of their neck and kick them out the door and have the media there and replace them with professionals and with people who are not incompetent. But I doubt if they'll do that.
Well, it's just another example of how Donald Trump has broken the brain of a lot of these Democrats, particularly when it comes to Russiagate, this impeachment thing, and now this. I mean, my God, and that paper-based system that you're talked about, we've run national elections that way. It can be done. It could be certainly done in the state of Iowa. And that's one thing I wanted to talk to you about here technically on the caucuses, which is kind of interesting. I think I saw where there's 175,000 caucus scores this time around. There were some.
That's very low.
Yes, exactly. I'd heard estimates that it might go to 300,000. And when Obama won in 2008 and you had the energized electorate, you had the minorities and the younger voters that wanted to come out and see change, it was over 200,000. So what do you make of that low turnout?
It's a puzzle. It's a puzzle because my students, I asked them all to register to vote if they're citizens and if they want to vote in Iowa. Obviously, those two things are requirements. And go to the caucus. Go to your caucus. They were not very enthusiastic, really. They weren't very enthusiastic because going to a place for 3 hours at night when it's dark and cold, and you have to publicly declare who you're supporting is hard on people. George, there are very few places in the world where elections are public and not private. The caucuses are a public election. Everyone knows how you are voting because you have to stand over there with Pete Buttigieg and over there with Bernie. Cuba, Venezuela, North Korea run their elections that way. You know exactly how people voted.
Yeah.
We should probably doing that. Primaries are more American in a sense because you go and it's private, you vote, and if some reporter says to you, well, hi, how did you vote? You go, it's none of your damn business. This is an election and I voted the way I wanted to. And, you don't need to know and you will not know. So there's that other thing that never has been brought up, George.
Oh, that's
never
big.
Brought up. The privacy of the vote has never been brought up as a real issue with the Iowa caucuses.
Well, I get it. I mean,
they were never meant to be like this.
No,
the caucuses were meant for just the party. They were never meant to be a public event.
Yeah, and the format is an issue, particularly with some of the younger people and people that aren't. Well, I can give you an example. I run a podcast. I mean, I'm on camera. I do this type of thing. I'm a little uncomfortable taking the floor and standing up and giving trial and testament to a particular political candidate in front of a group of friends and families and neighbors and who all know. I mean, yeah, I get that. What do you think about, now I'm talking about your students. We're never going to get a big minority turnout in the state of Iowa because we don't have a big minority to turn out. But we do have younger people. And when I was looking around at the coverage, I'm seeing people like me. I mean, I'm seeing old people. I'm seeing dyed-in-the-wool Democratic operatives, people that I recognize that have been around doing this stuff for decades. I didn't see the young people. Do you think it might be because of this weeks-long impeachment process, and they've been looking at this a little bit and saying, you know what? You guys are all the same. I'm not going to go down there and spend 3 hours at a caucus giving testament to a candidate when I see this impeachment dealing going on. Do you think that had a role in it?
Could be. I hadn't really thought about that, but I could add this to your comment. When I brought up impeachment and wanted to talk to my almost 100 students in my big class, which I just taught this morning, about impeachment, there was no interest in talking about it. Mm. It's one of the biggest events that can happen in politics in this country. They weren't interested. I think that there is this exhaustion with politics. I think people don't trust politics. I think people don't think that it can be a fair and clean process. And so that's a very disappointing thing because, elections and the selection of your presidential candidate, it's a privilege. A lot of countries don't have that. In Cuba, you can't go to a primary or a caucus, and we can. And if you don't go, then as I always say, well, then you're letting it up to the other guy to decide who you eventually might have a chance to vote for. So there is something rotten in the process, and I'm saddened by it. I don't know as we can fix it. But of course, the solution would be an easy and fun way to do it with internet voting and with where you can go to a website and you can click on the videos of the different candidates and they have a 30 or 60 second kind of summary of what they would do. And then you can vote, from your dorm room or whatever. I know a lot of people who say, oh, Stefan, go away. That's ridiculous. Voting is a serious process and it's for serious people. I always have said, we should give prizes for people to vote in caucuses as well as primaries. Go to a caucus and everybody gets a ticket with a number, and at the end of each caucus, a number is pulled out and can win a free lunch at Chick-fil-A or whatever. And for the elections, you can win some nice automobiles. And people say, oh, Stefan, that just demeans the process. Well, everything else we do in this country, you get rewarded for. And politics, it's supposed to be the kind of, abstract reward of, well, you got a wonderful politician now who is going to do great things. And it's too abstract.
I get that. And I'll put it in a little different perspective. People know that I do this podcast and there's politics on it. And they'll ask me who I'm supporting or what I think of the caucuses. And I'll give them an opinion and then ask them where they're at. And they'll say, well, I like somebody. Okay, you like them. Why do you like them? Well, they feel a certain way. Okay, you like somebody and you feel a certain way. Okay, well, here's my argument. And support it with some facts and information. Hopefully, I'll try to anyway. Well, they don't do that. They just want to. If they're going to support somebody, they want to do it because they feel a certain way and because they like that person. They'll take my argument and they'll say, well, I disagree. Well, okay, that's fine. Why? Well, no, I just disagree. No, wait a minute. If you disagree, you've got to have a reason why. No, I don't. Well, yeah.
You really have kind of hit the, sweet spot on how this works. And that's how the caucuses were this year, where we saw a lot of people interviewed in focus groups, and they were saying, well, I thought I was going to support Elizabeth Warren, but I saw her speak and I kind of didn't like her style and the way she was waving her arms. And so then I went to hear, Pete Buttigieg, and I really like him. I think he's a really nice person and he's really smart. And that is how a lot of people make that decision.
Yes.
It's what is called kind of personal trust. You trust someone, or you think someone will do something and you don't have to think about the issues and how to do it and so on. This person will take care of me. Donald Trump has taken over the Republican Party lock, stock, and barrel in a way that is amazing and glued it back together again. The Tea Party is finished. I mean, if the Tea Party ever squeaks and makes a single sound, Donald Trump will crush that person. You know, Steve King cannot say anything that Donald Trump doesn't agree with, or he'll be crushed. And so people in the Republican Party and many Democrats say, well, Donald Trump will get it done. He's an action guy and he's a businessman. He knows how to be successful. He doesn't take any crap from anybody. And that's how Donald Trump has been a very successful politician. I mean, amazingly successful.
Yeah. And some of these other candidates, and you mentioned like Biden, they start to fall by the wayside. Well, they got to lend their support and their followers to another candidate. Oftentimes, they'll kind of softly endorse someone. Those folks, to your point, they're not endorsing Bernie. They're going to throw that support to Buttigieg if he's the DNC frontrunner. And so as each one of these candidates clicks off, as Klobuchar clicks off, and as they all fall by the wayside as we move along, those people are going to go, for example, to the frontrunner at the time, which right now anyway, for the DNC's perspective, looks like Buttigieg. That'll strengthen his hand. And then I look at Bloomberg, and you mentioned him, and boy, is that a shocker, a surpriser, this multi-billionaire coming in late. And you think, what's this guy thinking about? He didn't even come to Iowa. He's not in New Hampshire. Well, I think he's sitting in there in the weeds looking for multiple candidates going to the convention like you and I talked about, having it go brokered, having it go to a second round, and then those super delegates. Man, is that multi-billion-dollar candidate Michael Bloomberg going to look good to those folks? I think he thinks he's going to be able to buy himself an election by influencing those super delegates in a brokered convention. But I mean, that's just me kind of rambling on and thinking about how this might shake out. That's kind of what I'm thinking at this time anyway.
That would make a great soap opera.
Yeah, wouldn't it? It'd make a Rachel Maddow show on another spy thriller on MSNBC. Doc, I gotta ask you.
You had an unknown black guy with an Hussein as a middle name who won the nomination. Not a billionaire. I think they found him to be a moderate, so he fit well into all of the Democratic elites. You had Bill Clinton, certainly not a billionaire, a poor guy, with all kinds of trouble hanging over him, all kinds of women's issues and real estate scandals and suicides of some of the, his close.
Oh my God, yeah.
In mysterious circumstances, and he got the nomination and got elected. So the elites, I don't think they have a specific, and the DNC don't have a specific person in mind, but they have a certain person they would rather not see in there. And I'm guessing Bernie Sanders is that person again. But Bernie is very angry right now because the app created by Hillary Clinton's people screwed up the exit out of Iowa, which he thinks he would have won big time, and he didn't get that momentum. And the Bernie bros, and I talked to some Bernie bros at the event center, at the news center down in Des Moines. I was there, for hours and hours and hours. And a lot of them said that they would not support most of the other Democrats running.
Right.
That if he didn't get it, they were either going to stay at home or vote for other races, but not for the presidential race. So this could be a repeat of Hillary versus Bernie. In this case, it would be Bernie and his supporters versus whoever. And that would mean Donald Trump will have a cakewalk to the reelection.
And I hate to use the term Bernie bros because it's kind of got a negative connotation, but those Bernie or bust people, that does have a negative connotation. I wonder if that also didn't have an effect on the turnout number for the caucus, if that was another reason that it didn't grow any and stuck down there around where it was at in 2016 at that 175,000 total. Those folks, they're going to vote for Bernie or nobody. And they know they're a protest vote, kind of, and they're just like, I don't need to go to the caucus. I know what I'm going to do. I don't need to go through that.
That's an interesting theory. I'm going to share that with some of my friends and see what they think. We don't have numbers. We don't have the statistics as to who turned out where. I know that Bernie did better in college towns. He did very well. He did very well in the Spanish language satellite caucus in Des Moines, because I worked with those folks, and the Hispanic Latino voters really like Bernie. They think, healthcare and education, things like that are very important to them. So they really turned out for him. But other than that, maybe that's the limit of Bernie Sanders anyway, is college students and liberals. And that's not enough to win a nomination, and probably not enough to win an election. There are lots of other people. There are other young people who would vomit at the idea of Bernie Sanders being the candidate because he's a socialist. There was some state legislator in some state, I can't remember which one, so I won't blame him, who said, that he thought the socialists should be rounded up and executed.
My God.
Firing squad. Yeah. Firing squad.
Of course, that's what some people called FDR, and he can be called kind of a New Deal Democrat from that perspective. I look at it. That's exactly right. I mean, that is the dichotomy that we face in American politics right now. You take the Bernie or bust people out of the Democratic bloc, they can't win. You take the corporate centrist moderate portion of that away from Bernie's populist support, he can't win. And those people are going to protect the interests of the private insurance industry, big pharma, big corporations. That's who they are. I mean, so you got that. I mean, those are two sides on the rope in a tug of war that almost is unwinnable.
You got it. And the irony is that we need more and better health care, but you try to take away health insurance from people who have health insurance. And you're talking about a majority of Americans. A majority of Americans have health insurance. It may not be great. It may not cover enough. It may be expensive and, all the rest of it. But you try to touch Social Security and you've got a problem. You try to touch Medicare and you've got a problem. You try to touch private health insurance. Elizabeth Warren and Bernie Sanders cannot sell that to a majority of American, even Democrats, because labor union guys don't like that. They have insurance of some sort. So there has to be a leader in the Democratic Party who is inspirational, who can say, look, we'll work this all out. Let's not fight about it now. Let's get me elected and I'll bring all of you around the table and we will figure out which pieces of the cake we will divide how. But if they do this in the primaries, they will just essentially self-destroy. And I think they don't seem to have a really great leader. There's no great Democratic leader right now. I'm sorry. That's just the reality.
Well, before we lose you here, Doc, I want to get to something that's interesting to me because we can talk to commentators and observers. They're nationally known. You're interesting because you've got this international angle. I know you were talking to the Telemundo folks. You've been talking to the folks at Canada. You get around all over the world with people that are wanting to ask you about this American political process. What's their take on this? And I'll give you kind of a lead in here. I got a buddy of mine. I play men's league hockey. You know that. A lot of my viewers know that also. I'm a hockey guy. I'm playing right now with a guy that's from Switzerland, a young guy. He came up to me and he said, what is it with you people in politics? I mean, he just couldn't get over the way we're at each other's throats. But what are the Telemundo folks? What are the Canadians saying? What are they telling you?
They are distressed because they count on the United States as being a stable country, as being a country that in their own home countries, I mean, a lot of these are American citizens, even if they work for Telemundo or Univision. Those countries depend on us trying to even keel the world, even though often we don't. We often actually disrupt things a lot more. But they can't imagine, what the world would be like if the United States sort of falls apart. And one of the things that came up, well, one of them was they said, Professor Schmidt, you look like Mandy Patinkin, the actor. And I said, well, I am. I'm his son. And so that was one thing that came up because of my goatee. The other thing is that, President Trump is a big supporter of Brexit. Brexit has happened. The United Kingdom has withdrawn from the European Union. The United States is like the European Union. It's a whole bunch of different places glued together with federalism and, some bribery in terms of federal money. But California and Alabama really don't have that much in common. the question came up, would President Trump be okay if Oregon, Washington State, and California decide, look, the Brexit model is really a smart thing, because if you don't like where you are, and you don't like the federal government, and you don't like the other stupid places that you have to sort of associate with, you should become an independent country. Would President Trump be okay with, an exit of the west coast of the United States to become, the Republic of Pacifica or whatever? And my students and I talked about that, and they were very interested in that idea. They said, well, if it's okay for the UK to pull out of the European Union, why wouldn't it be okay in the United States for a region to go separate? And I said, remember the Civil War? They said, we don't like where we are and we're going to become a separate country. But we were at one time. Texas, was a republic. A lot of the places in the Southwest were parts of Mexico. And so are we headed, with all the internal divisions we have, towards basically a rearrangement of the United States? And I guess it's a fascinating question. I don't know the answer. I know that constitutionally we would not allow it or endorse it. But if a region of the country decided, I can't take this anymore, and decides to leave, would we really send in federal troops and the Marines and aircraft carriers to crush that? I don't know. It's just, I'm getting old, so I can come up with really crazy things to discuss.
Me too.
I'm not going to be around, and so as long as they use me as a stand-in for Mandy Patinkin and give me a nice paycheck in Hollywood, I'm good with that.
God, that's great. Well, that's great, Doc. Again, thanks for coming on with us. We'll let you go and let you get back to the world of doctor politics, which has been a active thing here lately, and it's good that you came on with us. Folks, that's it makes me laugh. That's Dr. Stephen W. Schmidt, the Lucan Endowed Professor of Political Science at Iowa State University. He's a friend of the podcast. He's seen all over the world, and you got a chance to visit with him today. I hope you enjoyed that. We'll come back, Doc. I don't know, when the next time we get to
New Hampshire primary. That's when we should talk.
Yeah, and you talk to those folks a lot. You're all over New Hampshire. I know you're on public radio out there. So, yeah. Mm-hmm. All right, we'll do it. For right now, though, that's going to wrap it up. That's another podcast. By George.